Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by the U.S. Army Warrior Fitness Team, which provides awareness of Army opportunities while serving. Team members are active duty soldiers that compete in CrossFit and strong man, strong woman competitions, both nationally and internationally. To learn more, make sure you check out the link in our description. On today's episode, I'm here with Brian Friend to discuss this past weekend's Rogue Invitational online qualifier, where some notable athletes they won't be competing this year, but it's not because necessarily a lack of their fitness. First, Brian, can you kind of just give us the background? How does the online qualifier work? Who already has tickets to Rogue? And how many athletes can earn a spot based on these online qualifiers?
Yeah, so this will be the fourth iteration of the Rogue Invitational. It came up on the scene at the beginning of the sanctional season. And in the first two iterations of it, there was an online qualifier where I believe 5 men and 5 women were able to join 15 pre-qualified athletes for the live competition. Last season, they ended up inviting the top 20 from the games, and so there was no online qualifier. And this year, they've returned to an online qualifier format, though it's not exactly the same as it was in those original years. So the top 10 games finishers from the 2022 CrossFit Games received invites to compete at Rogue. We already know there have been some backfills or some invites further down the line than that. We've seen Ariel Lowen, who finished 11th at the games, and Nick Matthew, who is 14th, accept invites. So they're going to fill in a certain number of spots based on games performance. And then in the release of their online qualifier this year, they said that at least the top 5 through the qualifier will be able to join those who have pre-qualified based on their games experience. And my guess is that they included that at least just in the case there were a lot of decline invites, that they could just add a 6th or 7th qualifying spot to round out a field of 20.
Okay. So now this past weekend, athletes had the opportunity to register and try to punch that 5 or however many tickets they're actually going to confirm. But what we realized is, the rules, they were pretty specific, outlining everything that athletes need to know ahead of time. But as we've seen, some notable athletes won't be competing. And it was because of this section right here. The athletes must weigh all plates and barbells on camera. The process needs to start with showing the scale calibration by placing a dumbbell, kettlebell on the scale and showing the scale reading it, that the reading is correct. Camera must show each plate on the scale and the scale reading. Camera must show the barbell on the scale and the scale reading. Required regardless of equipment brand.
Yeah, and
What's happening here?
So basically, over the years in CrossFit, there always have been issues with online qualifiers for a variety of different reasons. And one of those is using fake plates or plates that are not labeled as much as they actually weigh. There are some kind of famous cases of this. It sounds kind of silly and ridiculous, but we've seen all kinds of things of athletes and coaches and camps trying to cut corners throughout sports historically, trying to get an inch where they can.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Rogue's way to ensure that doesn't happen. So whatever the plates you want to use, and I think it's important that they did include there that the brand is irrelevant since they are an equipment supplier.
Sure.
And I think that is at least in the athletes that I've spoken to, that is one of the things that they were kind of surprised by, is that I was using all Rogue equipment and still I got dinged or penalized for this. But credit to Rogue here is and has been included in the rules there. And it is and should always be the job of the athlete, the coach, or someone on their team to read those rules thoroughly before beginning one of these online qualifiers.
And when we look at some of the notable athletes, Travis Mayer, he's an OG. He, is really good with meeting the standards. But even in his post, he mentioned that he didn't read all of the rules. He, had an hour before the deadline submission and he had his video actually rejected by them because he didn't weigh his plates and barbell ahead of times. Travis Mayer, just one of many notable athletes. Who else are you hearing from?
So last night, I guess there was the leaderboard was populated, and there were Samuel Cornouaille, Travis Mayer, Benoit Boulanger, and Nicholas Hecht were 4 athletes who were all in the top 10 last night that had all gotten a penalty for essentially the same thing, which
Mhm.
was not weighing either their plates or barbell or both as part of workout one. Now, I haven't necessarily heard of any additional rejections for the other workouts. It was all for workout one so far, I believe. So it's possible that Rogue is still in the review process, and other athletes may still succumb to this similar penalty. And it's not. It seems to me that it's not a minor penalty or major penalty, as are often outlined in online competitions that are run by CrossFit. But this is basically a score invalidation, saying you didn't follow the rules, and so your score doesn't count at all, which is obviously as harsh a penalty as you could apply.
And what are your thoughts on that standard? I mean, we saw so many we were really scrutinizing the online qualifiers this past year because it didn't seem like there was consistency throughout the season with some of these standards. What do you think about Rogue taking it as if you didn't even do the workout? Is that the standard that everyone should be holding?
I would say yes. I mean, I think that the simple answer to this question is kind of a three-step process. You write the rules, and they're communicated ahead of time. That all of the athletes who decide to participate in the competition are expected to adhere by the rules. And if they don't adhere by the rules, then it's the competition organizer's responsibility to uphold the rules as written. So, that's a pretty basic and straightforward, thing in any sport. And we do see this come up sometimes or often in CrossFit competition where something will happen on the field of play. Someone will have a complaint about it and they'll say, it was briefed this way, and that's the way that it is. And that's how it should always be. The problem with this year and some of the online formats throughout the open quarterfinals and maybe a little bit in the Masters and Adaptive semifinal stages was that there wasn't necessarily that level of consistency. And so we don't have to relive all of those, situations, but we saw elements of it. And we saw someone like Annika Greer, who very clearly missed a deadline and she was removed from the season. We saw someone like Magnon Angonis, who very clearly missed a deadline and was removed from her opportunity to compete. It turns out actually both of those women are currently in a qualifying spot for Rogue, which is great.
Mhm.
But we saw other parts of the season where it clearly said something about a standard, and CrossFit even would post videos of someone doing this workout with an impressive feat that was in violation of the standard, and they upheld those scores anyway. And of course, the erroneous score submission situation with qualifier online quarterfinal workout number 3, where it was an uneven application of the rules, and basically they were just saying it didn't have an effect, and that was such a grand scale that they couldn't implement it. But I think in general that like you said, the lack of consistency is frustrating, and that in Rogue's defense here, that's not the case. They're not playing favorites. They're not saying this one's good, that one's not. They're saying this is the rule, and every one of you is expected to adhere to it.
So looking at Rogue though, to me, it's a little bit of a different situation when we're looking at scalability. I mean, on the men's leaderboard, there's just over 100 people. There's around 100 people on the women's side. When we're talking about the open or even quarterfinals, I mean, those are thousands of individuals that register for that. Is it possible to uphold this same standard when you're thinking of a bigger scale like quarterfinals or the open?
Well, I think that the answer to that is goes back to a bigger question, which is not everyone needs to do that, but you should I'm really, the more and more that things like this happen, the more and more I'm a believer that there should be two paths to register for the open, and you should register as a pro, which means that you're trying to compete in the season, or you should register as an amateur, which means that you're registering without the intent of competing for money later in the year, and you're just doing it to participate in this worldwide community event. And if you register as an amateur, no, you do not need to spend 10 minutes weighing every single plate and barbell at your gym. However, if your score is great and shows up in an impactful place on the leaderboard, then I think that CrossFit should include a caveat and say, even if you register as an amateur and you have a worldwide score that's impressive enough to impact the global leaderboard, we're going to ask for that video. And if you think you might do well enough on that workout and you want to adhere to that standard, you should probably do it just to make sure your score doesn't get invalidated. But if you're in the pro division, yes, I think that should and can be an expectation. And why not? It's, first of all, it eliminates any doubt about people using fake plates, which is not something we should really have to, it's sad that we even have to consider that as a reality, but it's happened before. So take it out of the equation. And secondarily, I was talking to one of the athletes who did the qualifier today who followed all of these rules. And it was, when I'm reading through them, I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, I'm warmed up. I'm ready to go. My video starts. And now I have to spend 10 minutes weighing plates and doing all this thing and showing measurements and hanging from a bar. It's like, but that's not that different than live competition. In fact, this athlete said to me, he goes, it's actually about half the amount of time to do all that as it is just standing around waiting in the corrals before we take the field of play at one of these elite competitions. So it's actually not that bad of a practice for a pro or elite level athlete anyway. So I think it is implementable. I don't think it's necessary for every athlete. And but I do think in some instances, it's kind of a good way to cover yourself as both the athlete and the competition. And I would say probably better off doing it than not.
So knowing that we have Wadapalooza, Dubai, some other online qualifiers coming up, do you think that they will look at this and take note, or do you think that they'll still kind of do their own thing?
I mean, probably both. I'm sure that the competition directors for Dubai and Wadapalooza are paying attention to Rogue and the game season and all the other major events. But each of those competitions has a unique flair and character of its own.
Mhm.
But to me, this is outside of that. This is like, it's an online competition that's qualifying for a major event that has major implications in terms of sponsorships, prize monies, and opportunities down the road. And you want to have the best people there. And you don't want the situation where someone does cheat in an online format and then comes there and is embarrassed or out of place on the competition floor. And if that means that you implement standards like this that preclude someone from like a Sam Cornway or a Travis Mayer, who obviously could be there at Rogue and be relevant and compete. In fact, I'd love to see Samuel Cornway there. I'm dying to know how he would stack up
Yeah.
against some of the best men from the games this year. But we've had this conversation before. If you can't follow the rules, that's part of playing the game. And in
Mhm.
this case, they're the ones that have to pay the price. And hopefully that price is heavy enough that not just them, but other people will say, oh shit, I got to get my act together and make sure that I do everything by the books. Otherwise, I'm not going to have a chance to go out there and show what I can do.
Mhm. So Brian, what's your bottom line?
My bottom line is that I'm actually in favor of what's happening here. Last year with so many problems that had existed in the online stages of the CrossFit Games season, Rogue is kind of upping the standard here and saying, nope, we wrote the rules. They're very clear. These are the rules. And if you didn't follow them, then you're out. I think it's okay to have a hard line like that. It sends a very clear message, and then it establishes a precedent going forward. So hopefully we can be less distracted by these distractions and more focused on the things that everyone wants to see, which is athletes showcasing what they can do at the best events.
All right, Brian. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have more online qualifiers. We'll see if we have more of these conversations or maybe more productive conversations when we can lay this one to rest.
Yeah, hopefully, just more focused on the results than anything else. That would be the ideal.
That's the goal. Thanks, Brian. We'll see you next time.